everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell and we're bored of it, and welcome to our review of The Mandalorian Adventures. This is a tactical shooter co-op game for 1 to 4 players where you'll be working with your teammate to complete missions, and it's based on series 1 of the show. Please note that we were kindly provided this copy for review by the publisher.
Now, Mandalorian Adventures is somewhat, you could say, a legacy game where you unlock content the more you play, and we will be spoiling that, and that is mainly because it is mostly mechanical. I mean, if you've watched the show, you know the storyline. There's nothing story at all. It's literally all just new mechanisms, and in many cases exactly the ones you would expect. So please note that from this point on, we probably will spoil things, both with B-roll and by talking about them. So if you want everything to be a surprise, find another review. The Mandalorian Adventures is a reasonably light cooperative game, and most of what you're going to be doing is playing scenarios. And the scenarios are thankfully pre-printed in this book, so there's only some light setup needed, kind of distributing enemies randomly. Sometimes they'll be face down because you'll be looking for certain things throughout the map, and you won't know if you'll get an enemy or what you're looking for. But essentially each player is going to pick a character to play as. Now, the rules recommend to only play certain characters, but this is mostly because they want you to play through the story of Season 1 of The Mandalorian, but there is really nothing to stop you just picking any character at any point. Now, each character has a semi-unique deck, and every card in that deck is going to have a strength value. Now, mostly you'll have 4 options available to you when you want to take an action. You have move, very simple. The strength of the card you play is how many hexes you can move. Attack, again, the strength of the card is how much damage you do to one enemy 1 space away or in the same space as you. Intel, again, the strength you play will either let you look at a face down token up to that much away, or push an enemy within range of the strength you played away from you, or just move them at least. Lastly, you have plan, and based on the strength of the card you played, you can draw that many cards from this little planning deck and keep one. And these are just little kind of one-time use cards that might prevent you from being damaged or allow you to damage enemies back when you get damaged, play an extra card, things like that. So what the trick of the game is that you play these strength cards to the actions. On your turn, you get to play 2 cards. But if the total strength of everything there equals 5 or more, you trigger an event card, which are banned. You also will trigger something negative if it's 6 or more, and every mission has its own unique thing that plays into what you're trying to do. But you at most really want to try and keep it to 5 exactly, otherwise you're getting double the badness. And this is where a lot of the interesting decisions come in do you go over, is it worth taking that action, is it worth triggering that crisis, which is the 6+ strength issue. And it's a lot of fun navigating this. And what's additionally fun is that a lot of the cards have actions which will trigger if you play these cards to specific action slots, meaning that if I put this one in plan, I get this additional thing, but maybe I don't want to plan right now, and that's a nice little kind of twist as well to consider. So each mission has something you're trying to do, an objective, usually get somewhere, find something, bring it back somewhere, while you ping enemies off the board by shooting them. It's a tactical shooter, and it's playing in a nice time, and it's giving you some nice decisions and some nice variability.
Firstly, this game is pretty similar to Mass Effect the board game, which is something we've been playing recently as we did a review of it, with the key difference being how you take the actions. In Mass Effect, it was about rolling dice and placing those dice on different action slots on your player board, Whereas in The Mandalorian, it's card driven, so the cards have values and that determines how much you can do of each action. We personally think that the missions and the objectives are more interesting in The Mandalorian. I would say maybe more thematic, as much as a game like this can be. For example, you have to maybe go through a scenario and protect Grogu. So it's a little bit more tied into the story, perhaps. Whereas the progression in Mass Effect is more interesting game to game, because you get to unlock different powers on your characters, but you get to decide in which direction you want to go on and which different character abilities you might want to unlock. Whereas here, you kind of unlock some different abilities, but you don't really have a hand in there, and the progression is quite minimal. Similar to what we said with Mass Effect, this is a really nice beer and pretzels type of co-op. It's pretty lightweight, pretty light-hearted. You don't have to do too much thinking, so probably more for people who prefer lighter games. If you prefer something heavier, there's not too much here that you can sink your teeth into. We really like the concept of the action system, as it creates this quite interesting dilemma about whether you go for a high value card versus is that then going to tip you over the edge and trigger an event or potentially even a crisis. It's also a really nice element that the back of the event deck will clue you in as to what type of event might be coming up, because then you can decide how much you can push in that particular turn. Can you afford to go over the threshold and trigger that particular type of event in the state that you're in now. It's also really nice that some of the action cards have additional actions when they're played to particular action slots, also increasing the number of kind of interesting decisions that you can make as a player. For example, maybe you have a card, if you play it to the attack action slot, will give you an additional bonus action, but potentially it then triggers you into event card. So you have to kind of weigh up if that bonus event is worth pushing you over the edge. It's also super nice that there are around 8 character decks, all of which are relatively unique and feel quite distinct. And then, of course, that's adding to the replayability.
Now, The Mandalorian actually comes with secrets, because there is an unlock deck, and after your first 6 games, you will each time unlock a little bit more. Now, this is going to be something that's quite divisive, and I think it will be divisive based on how heavy a gamer you are or how much of a hobbyist gamer you are. Because a lot of the unlocks to heavier games will be quite boring. For example, you unlock character powers for the characters, but this is like something that's extremely basic in most board games, that your character has a special power that's unique to them. Otherwise, it's usually one card to put in your deck or more cards to add to the event deck. And it's nice that this is kind of allowing you to go from a very light game and then kind of build up a bit of momentum, which is great if you're playing this for non-hobbyist gamers. But for people like, I'd say, me and Tally, we would have preferred that this was just included from the start. So we're not playing 4 games to get the kind of almost baseline experience. Now, the later stage unlocks are quite interesting, as they do allow you to replay missions in new ways, or they even add new missions which repurpose the map. And I think that is quite cool. So there is a lot of fun to be had with these unlocks and surprises, but also some of it not so fun, not so exciting, depending on your level of gaming. My biggest issue with The Mandalorian is that I think it tries to do too much. It pulls itself in too many different directions, and it doesn't really nail any of them. It wants to be a cooperative game, but it also wants to be a hidden traitor game. It wants to be a legacy game, but it wants to retell the story of The Mandalorian, but it also wants to have a sandbox mode. And it's all these weird little decisions coming together that make it feel like a little bit of a mess at times. For example, there's this kind of almost strict rigidity where they're saying you should follow the story of The Mandalorian. We're retelling that story. And it's basically saying only play as 2 characters in the first scenario, only play as 3 characters in this scenario, play as 4 characters in this scenario. But then there's a sandbox mode where you can play any number of characters and anyone, because it doesn't match up with the story, so it's a sandbox mode. I find that very weird. And then there's also a shared mode where if you want to stick to the story, players will share a character. And I don't think this is an interesting enough game in terms of gameplay to share a character. It's very strange that it wants to try and beat all these things, have these legacy elements, but really there's not much legacy. It's just unlocking mechanisms that arguably should have been there from the beginning. The fact that it kind of towards the end of that legacy deck leans very hard into being a hidden traitor game. And considering at first glance it seems to be going for, as we said, the beer and pretzel light cooperative crowd, it seems really weird that then it transitions into this hidden traitor game and makes it a core component of all of the advanced missions, or many of the kind of mercenary missions, which are additional missions that reconfigure the map. It's just very strange because hidden traitor games require a lot from the players, particularly the one who's the traitor. It puts a lot of kind of earnest and work on them. And for the people this game is for, it's probably a novel concept. So it's really weird that it's so tightly interwoven into the late game. And yeah, it just comes across as a little confused, essentially, with all these different elements fighting for space within the same box.
To be fair to The Mandalorian, despite seeming to only have 4 missions, there is actually a wealth of content that you can keep returning to, particularly if the hidden traitor mechanism would be a hit with your group. We do, however, still think it's a bit of a shame that only 4 maps are included that just get repurposed for the different scenarios, especially considering how easy it would have been to just add more maps. We do think it's quite nice though how there's different difficulty variations, so you can kind of chop and change there. For example, you can play on novice mode where your character has a little bit more health than standard to give you a bit more breathing room, up to a more advanced mode where you only have 3 cards in your hand rather than 4, and eventually you will unlock some more advanced enemies which are a little bit tougher to crack. All in all, for us at least, if we liked co-op games a little bit more than we do, or we didn't lean so heavy towards heavier games, it could be quite fun to keep returning and see more of the unlocked content. But for now, for us, after 6 plays, we do feel like we've seen everything that the game has to offer us, and there isn't too much more it can give us in terms of gameplay.
Final thoughts? Well, we did enjoy our initial few plays of the Mandalorian Adventures. I think we played about 6 or 7 games. We completed the legacy deck, you could say. I think that we don't have a lot of reason now to go back to it, and that's primarily because we're heavier gamers and we feel that we've gotten all we're going to get out of it. I think we're also not that interested in exploring the hidden traitor element of it. I don't think it'll be that interesting in a 2-player game.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be as good as other hidden traitor games, and I don't think this game is worth getting a bunch of people together to try it out either. But certainly enjoyed the action system and my time with it.
Yeah, agree. I think the missions and the objectives were a particular highlight for me. I found them very engaging because it wasn't just kind of go around and shoot them up, which of course you do as well, but it was just more tangible in a way, and you could really think about the story from the series. Like, you have to walk through the scenario and protect baby Grogu, for example. So I just found that very engaging and kind of makes you want to complete the mission in a way, because it's just something interesting. And the action selection system is also something quite unique and novel in terms of going over and making that decision if you can trigger an event, and give some nice table talk as well, with your co-op players as to, is this worth going over to trigger the event? Should we try and do this a different way? So all in all, enjoyed my time with it, but it's not something I'm going to ever be desperate to get off the shelf again.
Yeah, I think there's certainly people who will really enjoy this. I think that said, it's a shame that there wasn't more scenarios, considering that there's only 4, considering it's a pre-printed map. You only get 4, and you do get new ones, but they use the same map, and I don't know why they didn't include more, considering how it comes.
Yeah. Put a few more pages in the book.
Exactly. I also think that it tries to pull itself in too many different directions, and that hurts it overall. But certainly, I think for lighter gamers, for people who like the source material, people who like tactical shooters, there is a lot to offer here. So that was our review of the Mandalorian Adventures. Please ask us any questions you might have. Consider subscribing if this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.